You don't belong here, Zara. Leave my son's wedding. Helena's voice sliced through the California garden, her venomous words echoing over the stunned crowd. Zara, a black woman cloaked in quiet strength, stood defiant, her pendant gleaming with secrets untold. The air trembled with whispers of a jet's distant roar, a shadow of her hidden power. Lucas, her groom, wavered, his love tested by his mother's hate. Amara, Zara's ally, waited in the wings, holding truce that could shatter Helena's facade. In this clash of legacy and lies, Zara's empire would rise, unyielding. Share your thoughts in the comments. What would you do in Zara's shoes? Zara's fingers trembled as she adjusted the gold pendant around her neck, its weight a silent tether to a history she could never escape. The pendant, an intricate Yoruba carving, gleamed under the sterile lights of the New York Museum, whispering of ancestors who'd fought and bled for it. She stood amidst the crowd, her curator badge pinned neatly to her blazer, but her heart thundered with a secret heavier than the artifact itself. She wasn't just the curator. She owned this exhibit, every mask, every bead, every fragment of her people's stolen legacy, worth hundreds of millions. A legacy she'd guarded in silence, fearing the world's greed, the same greed that had stripped her family bare a century ago. Remarkable, isn't it? A voice, warm and curious, cut through the hum of the gala. Zara turned, her breath catching as she met Lucas's eyes, green, sharp, alive with a spark that made her skin prickle. He gestured to a bronze statue, his architect's hands tracing the air as if he could feel its contours. The way it holds time, like it's still breathing. She smiled, her lips tight, practiced. It's more than art, it's survival. Her voice was soft, but the words carried a blade's edge, one Lucas didn't seem to notice. He leaned closer, his enthusiasm unguarded, childlike almost, and it stirred something in her, a dangerous flicker of trust. They talked for hours, weaving through the crowd, their words dancing from Yoruba mythology to modern design. Lucas spoke of buildings as stories, Zara of artifacts as wounds. She let herself laugh, let her guard slip just enough to feel the warmth of his presence. But when he asked about her life beyond the museum, her stomach twisted. Just a girl who loves history, she said, her eyes flickering to the pendant. A half-truth, safer than the whole. Do you ever feel like you're hiding something? Lucas's question came later, over coffee in a quiet corner of the gala. His tone was playful, but his gaze held hers, searching. Her pulse spiked, fingers tightening around her cup. Did he know? Had he seen through her already? Everyone hides something, she replied, her voice steady despite the storm inside. What about you? What's your secret, Lucas? She leaned forward, deflecting, her smile a shield. He laughed, rubbing the back of his neck. Guess I'm an open book. Just a guy who dreams of building something that lasts. His sincerity stung, a reminder of why she'd kept her empire hidden. She wanted to believe in him, in this moment, but the pendant burned against her skin. A warning. Trust had cost her family everything once. The night ended with an invitation. Coffee again tomorrow? Lucas asked, his eyes hopeful, unguarded. Zara hesitated, her mind racing. She saw her grandmother's face, heard her warnings about men who smiled too easily, about a world that took what it didn't earn. But Lucas's warmth lingered, a dangerous pull. Sure, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. As he walked away, she touched the pendant again, its edges sharp against her fingertips. She was Zara Adeyemi, heir to a stolen legacy, a woman who'd built an empire from shadows. And yet, standing in the museum she secretly owned, she felt like a fraud, playing a role to test a man she already wanted to keep. The next week she met Lucas again, and again. Each coffee, each museum stroll, chipped away at her walls. He spoke of his dreams, skyscrapers that kissed the sky, homes that held families together. She spoke of art, of stories carved in stone, but never of the millions she'd earned reclaiming her heritage, never of the jet that waited in a hangar, ready to carry her secrets across continents. With every meeting, her heart betrayed her, whispering that Lucas might be different, that he might see her, not her wealth, But doubt gnawed at her. She'd seen it before. Smiles that turned to greed once the truth was out. Her family's history was a ledger of betrayal, of colonial hands plundering their art, their pride. She'd learned early to trust no one, to hide her power behind a curator's badge and thrift store dresses. Yet Lucas's laughter, his unguarded questions, made her want to unravel, to let him in. One evening, as they stood outside a gallery, the city's pulse thrumming around them, Lucas took her hand. His touch was warm, tentative, and it sent a jolt through her. "Zara, I don't know what it is about you," he said, his voice low, "but I feel like you're holding back a universe. I want to know it all." Her throat tightened. The pendant felt like a noose now, a reminder of the risk. She could tell him about the company, the artifacts, the wealth that could buy his dreams 10 times over. But what if he changed? What if his eyes, so clear now, clouded with ambition? She pulled her hand back, her smile faltering. "Maybe I'm just a mystery you'll have to solve," she teased, but her chest ached with the weight of her silence. As she walked home, the city's lights blurring through unshed tears, Zara's mind churned. She wanted Lucas, wanted the life he promised without knowing he promised it. But the pendant, her family's last relic, pressed against her heart, a reminder of what happened when trust was misplaced. She'd built her empire to reclaim what was stolen, to prove her worth to a world that doubted her. Could she risk it all for a man who didn't even know her truth? She stopped, staring at her reflection in a shop window. The woman looking back was fierce, unbroken, but her eyes held a flicker of fear. Lucas was a question she wasn't ready to answer, a gamble she couldn't afford to lose. But as she touched the pendant one last time, she made a choice. She'd let him closer, just close enough to test him. And if he failed, if he saw her wealth before her soul, she'd walk away, her empire intact, her heart in pieces. Zara's breath hitched as she stepped into Lucas's world, a cozy Brooklyn loft filled with sketches of impossible buildings and the faint scent of cedar. Her fingers brushed the pendant, its sharp edges grounding her as she smiled at his friends, artists, dreamers, architects like him. They welcomed her with easy laughter, but their questions about her roots landed like pinpricks. "Where are you really from?" one asked, her tone too curious, too pointed. Zara's jaw tightened, but she deflected with a laugh. "Born and raised in Harlem, but my soul's from Lagos." The room chuckled, but her heart pounded, the pendant a silent scream of her hidden truth. Lucas's hand found hers, warm and steady, and for a moment she let herself lean into it. They'd been dating for months now, their connection a fragile bridge built on museum dates and late-night talks. She'd let him see pieces of her, her love for jazz, her obsession with old books. But never the empire she'd built, the millions she'd clawed back from a world that stole from her ancestors. Each time he asked about her life, her stomach twisted, a tug of war between wanting to confess and fearing his eyes would change. "Zara, you're quiet tonight," Lucas said, pulling her aside as the party buzzed around them. His brow furrowed, concern softening his green eyes. "Everything okay?" She forced a smile, her fingers twitching against her glass. "Just taking it all in. Your friends are lively." Her voice was light, but inside she was cataloging every glance, every word, searching for cracks in their warmth. She'd learned early to read rooms, to spot the flicker of judgment beneath polite smiles. Her family's history, artifacts looted, promises broken, had taught her that trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. He squeezed her hand. "They love you. I mean, how could they not?" His sincerity cut her, a blade of hope she didn't dare wield. She wanted to believe him, wanted to drown in the warmth of his words. But the pendant burned against her chest, a reminder of what happened when you let your guard down. The evening took a sharp turn when Lucas announced, "Time to meet the family." His voice was bright, but Zara's stomach dropped. She'd known this was coming, but the thought of facing his mother, Helena, made her palms sweat. Lucas had described her as traditional, a retired teacher with a sharp tongue and sharper expectations. Zara braced herself, slipping on the armor of her curator's smile. Helena's home was a fortress of old money, mahogany furniture, crisp white linens, a chill that seeped into Zara's bones. Helena greeted her with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, her handshake firm but fleeting. "Zara, how lovely to meet you," she said, her voice smooth as polished glass. "Lucas has told me so much, though I must say he's been vague about your background." Zara's pulse quickened, but she kept her face serene. "I work at the museum. Art's my passion." She let the words hang, simple, unadorned, watching Helena's eyes narrow, searching for something to latch on to. "Art," Helena repeated, her tone laced with something Zara couldn't quite name. Curiosity, disdain, or both. "That's quaint. And your family? What do they do?" The question was a probe, a scalpel slicing toward Zara's core. "They're teachers mostly," Zara lied, her voice steady despite the lie's bitter taste. Her family was gone, their legacy scattered in auction houses, but she wouldn't give Helena the satisfaction of a story to dissect. The pendant felt heavier, a silent vow to protect what was hers. Dinner was a battlefield of subtext. Helena's questions came like arrows, about Zara's plans, her ambitions, each one cloaked in politeness but dripping with doubt. "It must be hard coming from where you do," Helena said, sipping her wine. "New York can be so unforgiving for some." Zara's fork paused midair, her blood simmering. She caught Lucas's glance, his apologetic smile, but he said nothing, his silence a weight on her chest. "I manage," she replied, her voice cool, her eyes locked on Helena's. The older woman's lips twitched, a predator sensing resistance. Later, as they left, Lucas squeezed her hand. "She'll warm up, I promise. She's just protective." His words were hopeful, but they grated against Zara's raw nerves. Protective of what? His heart, or the family name she assumed Zara couldn't match? That night, alone in her modest apartment, Zara sat at her desk, the glow of her laptop casting shadows on her face. She'd kept her empire hidden, but Helena's words had stirred something reckless in her. She opened a secure server, one only she could access, and began digging. If Helena wanted to play games, Zara would play to win. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling threads of Helena's past, public records, old articles, whispers of a scandal buried deep. What she found made her breath catch. An email, intercepted through a contact in her network, sent from Helena to a friend. "Lucas's new girl is charming, but hardly suitable. We need to protect him from mistakes." The words burned, each one a confirmation of the prejudice Zara had sensed. But there was more, a hint in a decades-old article about Helena's first husband, a vague mention of questionable dealings tied to African art. Zara's heart raced, her fingers trembling as she closed the laptop. The pendant gleamed in the dim light, a beacon of her resolve. Helena thought she could dismiss her, reduce her to a stereotype. But Zara wasn't just a curator, wasn't just Lucas's girlfriend. She was a woman who'd rebuilt a legacy from ashes, who held secrets that could topple empires. And if Helena wanted a fight, Zara would give her one. But not yet. She'd wait, gather her weapons, let the older woman underestimate her. As she lay in bed, the city's hum a distant pulse. Zara's mind churned. Lucas's silence at dinner lingered, a crack in her trust. She wanted to love him, wanted to believe he'd stand by her when the truth came out. But Helena's words, her cold eyes, echoed her grandmother's warnings. "They'll smile until they see your power, then they'll try to take it." Zara's fingers brushed the pendant, its edges cutting into her palm. She'd let Lucas closer, but she'd watch him, test him. And if Helena pushed her too far, Zara would unleash a storm even a mother's love couldn't withstand. Zara's fingers hovered over the keyboard, the screen's glow casting her face in sharp relief. The email from Helena stared back, its words a venomous thread. "She's not one of us, Margaret. Lucas is too naive to see it." Her pulse thrummed, a drumbeat of fury and resolve. She'd hacked into Helena's account. Child's play for someone who'd built a shadow empire on secrecy. But each message she uncovered was a fresh cut. Helena wasn't just suspicious. She was orchestrating a campaign, whispering to Lucas's friends, planting seeds of doubt about Zara's intentions. The pendant at her throat pulsed with her heartbeat, a reminder of the stakes. She wasn't just fighting for Lucas. She was fighting for her right to exist without apology. Zara? Lucas's voice broke through, soft but close, as he leaned against the doorway of her apartment. His eyes, usually warm, flickered with concern. You've been staring at that screen for hours. What's wrong? She snapped the laptop shut, her smile a practiced mask. Just work. Curator stuff. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled, betraying the storm inside. Lucas didn't know about the company, the millions, the jet waiting in a hangar to carry her secrets. He didn't know about Helena's emails, her veiled racism cloaked in concern for family values. And he didn't know Zara was one step away from exposing it all. He crossed the room sitting beside her, his hand grazing her arm. You've been distant. Did I do something? His voice cracked, a boyish vulnerability that tugged at her heart. She wanted to spill everything. Helena's sabotage, her own hidden empire. But the pendant burned against her skin, a warning. Trust was a trap, and she'd seen too many fall into it. You didn't, she said, her eyes meeting his. But your mom, she's not exactly my biggest fan. Her words were careful, testing, watching for his reaction. Lucas's face fell, his shoulders slumping. She's just old school. Give her time, Zara. She'll come around. His tone was hopeful, but his eyes darted away, avoiding the truth. She felt a pang, sharp and cold. He'd seen Helena's barbs at dinner, heard her questions about Zara's background, yet here he was, deflecting, choosing peace over confrontation. Time, Zara repeated, her voice low, almost a whisper. How much time does she need to stop seeing me as a threat? Her fingers tightened around the pendant, its edges biting into her palm. She wanted to scream, to demand he choose a side, but she held back, her silence a weapon she'd honed over years. Lucas reached for her hand, but she pulled away, standing to pace the small room. I'm trying, Lucas. I'm trying to fit into your world, but it feels like I'm on trial. Her voice trembled, not with tears, but with the weight of holding back. She saw it in his eyes, guilt, confusion, but no fire, no resolve to fight for her. I'll talk to her, he said, standing, his voice firm but hollow. I'll make her see you the way I do. But his words felt like a promise he didn't know how to keep, and Zara's heart sank. She needed a warrior, not a diplomat. That night, alone again, Zara dove deeper into Helena's past. Her contacts, art dealers, historians, a discreet hacker she'd hired to protect her company, fed her fragments of a story. Helena's first husband, a minor art collector, had died under murky circumstances, leaving her a fortune tied to acquisitions in Africa. An article from a defunct journal mentioned a stolen Yoruba mask sold on the black market, with whispers pointing to Helena. Zara's breath caught, her fingers tracing the pendant. Was this why Helena hated her? Did she sense Zara's connection to the same legacy she'd exploited? She sent a coded message to her contact, a historian named Amara, asking for more. Dig deeper, she typed, her heart pounding. Find the mask. If Helena had built her life on stolen art, Zara would tear it down piece by piece, but the thought of exposing her gnawed at Zara's conscience. Would it break Lucas? Would he see her as the villain for destroying his mother? The next day, at a gallery opening, Lucas's friends were colder, their smiles tighter. One, a painter named Clara, pulled Zara aside. I heard you're ambitious, she said, her tone laced with suspicion. Just be careful with Lucas, okay? He's trusting. Zara's blood boiled, recognizing Helena's handiwork. The rumors had spread, a slow poison seeping into Lucas's circle. Did Helena tell you that? Zara asked, her voice sharp, her eyes locking onto Clara's. The woman flinched, stammering, but Zara didn't wait for an answer. She walked away, her heels clicking against the marble floor, her mind racing. Helena wasn't just whispering, she was waging war. Later, Lucas found her staring at a painting, a storm of blues and reds that mirrored her turmoil. Clara said something, didn't she? He asked, his voice low, guilty. I'll talk to her too. I swear, Zara, I'm on your side. Are you? The words slipped out, raw, unguarded. She turned to him, her eyes blazing. Because it feels like I'm fighting alone. Her chest tightened, the pendant a weight pulling her under. She wanted to believe him, wanted to cling to the warmth in his eyes, but his silence at dinner, his hesitation now, cut deeper than Helena's words. Lucas reached for her, but she stepped back, her breath uneven. I need you to show me, Lucas. Not just words. Her voice broke, a crack in her armor. He nodded, his face pale, but she saw the doubt in his eyes, the fear of choosing between her and his mother. As they left the gallery, Zara's phone buzzed. A message from Amara. Found a lead on the mask, linked to Helena, 1980s. Dangerous territory. Proceed? Zara's heart raced, her fingers trembling as she typed. Keep going. The pendant felt alive now, a pulse of vengeance. Helena thought she could break her, reduce her to a stereotype. But Zara was no pawn. She was a queen, her empire built on the bones of her ancestors' pain. And if Lucas couldn't stand by her, if Helena pushed her to the edge, Zara would unleash a truth that would shatter them all. Zara's fingers clutched the pendant, its sharp edges grounding her as she stood in the gallery's shadow, Lucas's proposal echoing in her ears. He dropped to one knee amidst a crowd of strangers, his voice trembling with hope as he offered a simple gold ring. Marry me, Zara, he'd said, his green eyes alight with a dream she wanted to believe in. Her yes had slipped out, raw and reckless, but now as they planned their wedding, her heart churned with doubt. The pendant burned against her skin, a reminder of the empire she hid, the secrets she guarded, and the enemy she faced in Helena. You sure about this venue? Lucas asked, his voice cutting through the hum of their planning session in a cramped coffee shop. His laptop glowed with images of a California garden, its sprawling lawns framed by ancient oaks, the sky open enough for a jet to land. Zara's choice, deliberate, a stage for her contingency plan. She nodded, her smile tight. It's perfect, open, free, like us. But her stomach twisted, knowing freedom was a lie as long as Helena's shadow loomed. Lucas reached for her hand, his touch warm but tentative. You've been quiet. Is it Mom again? His brow furrowed, guilt flickering in his eyes. Zara's pulse quickened, the weight of Helena's emails. She's after something, Lucas. Protect yourself. Pressing against her ribs. She wanted to scream the truth, to tell him his mother was a snake, but the pendant whispered caution. She needed proof, not just words to shatter Helena's facade. She's challenging, Zara said, her voice low, measured. But I'm here for you, not her. Her eyes searched his, hunting for the strength she needed him to show. He squeezed her hand, but his silence stung, a reminder of his hesitation at dinner, his failure to stand firm against his mother's barbs. Planning continued, but Helena's sabotage crept in like poison. She delayed sending the guest list, her emails to Lucas laced with suggestions of a smaller, more intimate wedding to avoid complications. Zara's jaw clenched as she read one, intercepted through her network. A big event might expose her background. The word background was a blade, slicing at Zara's identity, her heritage. She forwarded it to Amara, her historian contact, with a single line, find the mask, now. Late at night, alone in her apartment, Zara's phone buzzed. Amara's message was a jolt. Confirmed, Helena sold a Yoruba mask in '87, stolen from a Lagos collection. Buyer's dead, but records exist. Dangerous to pursue. Zara's breath caught, her fingers trembling as she traced the pendant. Helena wasn't just prejudiced. She was a thief, her wealth built on the same legacy Zara had spent years reclaiming. The irony burned. Helena dared call her a gold digger while hiding her own crimes. Zara's mind raced, torn between confrontation and strategy. Exposing Helena now might alienate Lucas, fracture the fragile love they'd built. But waiting felt like surrender, a betrayal of the ancestors whose pain she carried. She closed her eyes, imagining the jet landing in that California garden, its roar drowning out Helena's lies. It wasn't just about wealth, it was about justice, about proving her worth to a woman who saw only her skin. The next day at a dress fitting, Lucas's voice broke her reverie. "You're glowing," he said, his smile soft as he watched her adjust a simple silk gown, its lines echoing the elegance of her pendant. "I can't wait to see you walk down that aisle." His words were warm, but Zara's chest tightened. She wanted to believe in his love, but his silence against Helena's attacks lingered like a bruise. "Lucas," she said, turning to face him, her voice sharp enough to cut through the shop's quiet hum. "If your mom keeps pushing, will you stand up to her? Really stand up?" Her eyes locked onto his, demanding truth. The air between them thickened, heavy with unspoken fears. He swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing. "I will. I promise." But his hesitation, that split-second pause, was a crack in her trust. She nodded, turning back to the mirror, her reflection a warrior cloaked in silk. She'd chosen the garden for its open sky, a canvas for her truth if Lucas failed her. The jet was ready, her pilot on standby, and Amara's evidence waited like a loaded gun. That evening, Zara met Amara in a dimly lit bar, the historian's face grim as she slid a folder across the table. "This is it," Amara whispered. "Proof Helena fenced the mask. But if you use it, it'll destroy her. And maybe Lucas." Zara's fingers brushed the folder, her heart pounding. Inside were photos, receipts, a trail leading to Helena's past. Her hands shook, not with fear, but with the weight of power. She could end Helena, expose her hypocrisy. But at what cost? As she walked home, the city's pulse a distant roar. Zara's mind churned. Lucas's love was a fragile thread, stretched taut by his mother's venom. She wanted to trust him, to believe he'd choose her when the truth erupted. But the pendant, warm against her skin, whispered of betrayal, of a world that punished those who dared to rise. Helena thought she could break her, dismiss her as a threat. But Zara was no victim. She was a storm, gathering strength, and if Lucas couldn't stand by her, if Helena pushed her to the edge, that jet would land and the truth would burn them all. Zara's fingers dug into the folder, its edges creasing under her grip as she sat in her apartment. The city's hum, a faint pulse beyond her window. Amara's evidence, a grainy photo of a Yoruba mask, a receipt with Helena's name, burned in her hands, a ticking bomb. The pendant at her throat thrummed with her heartbeat, a silent vow to her ancestors. She'd built an empire to reclaim their legacy. But now, with Lucas's ring glinting on her finger, she felt the weight of a choice. Expose Helena and risk losing him, or swallow her rage and play the part of the dutiful fiancé. Her jaw tightened, the decision a knot in her chest. "You're sure about the garden?" Lucas's voice came from the doorway, soft but probing, as he leaned against the frame, his architect's eyes scanning her face. They'd finalized the California venue, a sprawling estate with lawns that stretched toward the horizon, perfect for her jet's dramatic arrival if it came to that. "It's so exposed." "That's the point," Zara snapped, sharper than she meant, her eyes flicking to his. She softened her tone, forcing a smile. "It's freedom, Lucas. No walls, just us." But her words hid a truth. The open sky was her battlefield, a stage to unveil Helena's sins if Lucas's loyalty faltered. He crossed the room, his hand brushing her shoulder. "You've been on edge. Is it the wedding? Or Mom?" His voice was gentle, but the mention of Helena sent a jolt through her. She saw the emails in her mind. "She's not right for you, Lucas. She's hiding something." Each word a blade carving at her resolve. Helena's sabotage had escalated. Anonymous texts to Zara's friends, whispers about her questionable finances, had started to ripple, tainting the air around her. "I'm fine," Zara lied, her voice steady despite the storm inside. She stood, moving to the window, her reflection a shadow against the city lights. "Just a lot to juggle." Her fingers brushed the pendant, its edges sharp, grounding. She wanted to tell him about the company, the millions, the mask Helena had stolen, but his hesitation, his failure to challenge his mother, held her back. Trust was a gamble, and she'd lost too much to bet blindly. Lucas followed, his arms wrapping around her from behind. "I'll talk to her, Zara, I swear." His breath was warm against her neck, but his promise felt thin, a thread fraying under pressure. She turned, searching his eyes for the fire she needed. but found only guilt, a flicker of doubt that cut deeper than Helena's words. Talk isn't enough, she said, her voice low, trembling with restrained fury. She's trying to tear us apart, Lucas. Do you even see it? Her hands shook, the folder's weight heavy in her mind. She could end this now, show him the proof. But what if he chose his mother? What if he saw her power and turned away? He flinched, his hands dropping. I see it. I don't know how to fix her. His admission was raw, a crack in his armor, but it wasn't enough. Zara's chest ached, the pendant a burning reminder of her solitude. She needed him to fight, not confess. That night, Zara's phone buzzed with Amara's update. More evidence. Helena's name on a second sale, 1989. Dangerous players involved. Jet ready? Zara's heart raced, her fingers typing a single word. Yes. She'd ensured the jet was prepped, its crew on standby, not just for escape, but to deliver Amara with the truth. The California Gardens open field was no accident. It was her chessboard, and Helena was about to be checkmated. The next day, tension clung to her like damp cloth. At a vendor meeting, Lucas's phone buzzed incessantly. Helena demanding changes to the guest list, insisting on fewer of Zara's people to keep things manageable. Zara overheard, her blood simmering, but she kept her face neutral, nodding at the florist's suggestions. Lucas's weak protest, "Mom, stop micromanaging," was a whisper against a storm, and Zara's patience frayed. Later, alone in a cafe, Zara met Amara, the historian's eyes sharp with urgency. "This is bigger than you thought," Amara said, sliding another photo across the table. A young Helena, smug, holding the stolen mask at an auction. She built her life on this. If you expose her, it's not just shame, it's ruin. Zara's throat tightened, her fingers tracing the pendant. Ruin was tempting, a fire she wanted to unleash, but Lucas's face flashed in her mind. His smile, his hesitation, his fragile loyalty. "What if he doesn't choose me?" Zara whispered, her voice breaking for the first time. Amara's gaze softened, but her words were steel. "Then he doesn't deserve you, but you owe your ancestors the truth." The words hit like a slap, waking something fierce in Zara. She nodded, pocketing the photo, her resolve hardening. As the wedding loomed, Helena's attacks grew bolder. A call to Lucas, overheard by Zara. "She's not our kind, darling. You need someone who fits." Zara's hands clenched, nails biting into her palms. She imagined confronting Helena, the jet landing, Amara stepping out with the truth. But doubt gnawed at her. Would Lucas stand by her, or would he crumble under his mother's weight? That night, Zara stood before her mirror, the silk gown draped over a chair, its simplicity a stark contrast to the war inside her. The pendant gleamed, a beacon of her strength. She'd built an empire from nothing, reclaimed her heritage from thieves like Helena. But love was a different battlefield, one where her wealth couldn't shield her. Lucas's promises, his half-hearted defenses, were cracks in her heart. She needed him to fight, to choose her without hesitation. If he didn't, if Helena pushed her to the edge, that jet would land, and the truth would burn brighter than any vow. Zara's pulse thundered in her ears as she stood in the California garden, the silk of her gown whispering against her skin. The air was thick with jasmine and anticipation, the sprawling lawn bathed in golden light, guests murmuring under the open sky. Her pendant, heavy with the weight of her ancestors, pressed against her chest, a silent vow to never bow. Lucas stood beside her, his hand warm but unsteady in hers, his smile faltering as he glanced at the crowd. She wanted to believe in him, in the love that had carried them here, but Helena's shadow loomed, a storm waiting to break. The ceremony had been flawless, a fleeting dream where Lucas's eyes held hers, brimming with promises. But now at the reception, the air shifted. Zara felt it, the prickle of eyes, the hush of whispers, as Helena moved through the crowd, her smile sharp as a blade. Zara's fingers brushed the pendant, her resolve steeling. She'd planned for this, the jet on standby, Amara ready with the truth. The garden's open field was her arena, and she would not be cast out. "Zara, you're stunning," a guest murmured, clinking glasses. but the compliment felt hollow. She nodded, her smile a mask, her eyes scanning for Helena. Lucas pulled her close, his breath warm against her ear. "You okay? You seem distant." Her jaw tightened, his concern a reminder of his silence against his mother's venom. "I'm fine," she said, her voice cool, but her heart raced. She wanted to shake him, demand he see the war she was fighting alone. Instead, she sipped her wine, her gaze locking on Helena, who stood by the bar, her laughter too loud, her eyes glassy with champagne. The moment came like a spark to dry grass. Helena seized the microphone, her voice cutting through the band's soft jazz. "A toast," she declared, her smile a brittle veneer. The crowd quieted, glasses raised, but Zara's stomach twisted. She knew that tone, that glint in Helena's eyes. "To my son," Helena began, her voice syrupy, "who deserves a love as pure as his heart, and to his bride." The pause was a weapon, sharp and deliberate. "I only hope this union is built on truth, not ambition." The crowd shifted, murmurs rippling. Zara's fingers clenched the stem of her glass, the pendant burning against her skin. Lucas's hand tightened on hers, but he said nothing, his silence a betrayal that cut deeper than Helena's words. Guests exchanged glances, phones discreetly raised, sensing a spectacle. Zara's blood boiled, her breath shallow. She'd endured Helena's barbs for months, but this, publicly branding her a gold digger on her wedding day, was a line crossed. "Helena," Zara said, her voice low, slicing through the tension. She stepped forward, her gown catching the light. "If you have something to say it clearly." Her eyes locked onto Helena's, a challenge. The older woman's smile faltered, but the champagne fueled her recklessness. "Oh, Zara," Helena slurred, swaying slightly. "We all know why you're here. A girl like you, latching onto my son's future. You don't belong in this family." The words landed like a slap, the crowd gasping, phones now openly recording. Lucas's face paled, his mouth opening, but no words came. Zara's heart cracked, his silence louder than Helena's venom. "Mom, stop," Lucas finally managed, his voice weak, pleading. He reached for Helena's arm, but she shook him off, her eyes blazing with years of prejudice unleashed. "I'm saving you, Lucas," she snapped. "She's a fraud, a leech, using you to climb out of whatever hole she came from." Zara's vision blurred, not with tears but with rage. Her hand slipped into her clutch, fingers grazing her phone. She could end this now, call the jet, let Amara's evidence burn Helena's lies to ash. But Lucas's silence, his failure to defend her, was a wound she hadn't expected. She needed him to fight, to choose her, but he stood frozen, torn between mother and wife. "Enough," Zara said, her voice a blade cutting through the crowd's murmurs. She stepped closer to Helena, her eyes unyielding. "You don't know me. You never tried." Her words trembled with restrained fury, the pendant a pulse of strength. Guests leaned in, the air electric with anticipation. Helena laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "I know exactly what you are. A schemer, preying on my son's trust. Leave, Zara. This is his day, not yours." The crowd gasped again, the band faltering. Zara's hand tightened on her phone, her thumb hovering over the call button. She saw Lucas's face, pale, pleading, but still silent. Her heart sank, the pendant a weight pulling her toward a choice. She pressed the button. "Amara," she whispered into the phone, her voice deadly calm. "Bring it, now." She hung up, her eyes never leaving Helena's. The older woman smirked, oblivious, thinking she'd won. But Zara felt the ground shift, the distant hum of jet engines growing louder. She'd planned for this, chosen the garden for its open sky, its stage. Helena thought she could cast her out, reduce her to nothing. But Zara was no victim. She was a storm, and the truth was coming. Lucas grabbed her arm, his voice low, desperate. "Zara, what's happening? Don't do this." His eyes searched hers, fear replacing the warmth she'd once trusted. She pulled away, her chest tight with betrayal. "You didn't do enough," she said, her voice breaking. "I needed you to fight for me." The jet's roar grew, a shadow crossing the horizon. Guests turned, pointing. their murmurs rising to a frenzy. Helena's smirk faded, confusion flickering in her eyes. Zara stood tall, the pendant gleaming, her heart a battlefield of love and vengeance. She'd wanted Lucas's love to be enough, but his silence had forced her hand. The jet was coming, and with it, a truth that would shatter everything. The jet's roar split the sky, a primal scream that silenced the garden's murmurs. Zara stood rooted, her gown shimmering under the fading sun, the pendant at her throat a blazing ember against her skin. Guests gaped, their phones raised like torches, capturing the sleek aircraft as it descended onto the open field, its engines a thunderous rebuke to Helena's venom. Zara's heart pounded, not with fear but with a fierce clarity. Lucas's silence had pushed her here, to this precipice, and she would not falter. Helena's smirk had vanished, her champagne flute trembling in her hand as the jet's shadow loomed. "Zara, what is this?" Lucas's voice cracked, his hand reaching for her, but she stepped back, her eyes fixed on the horizon. His desperation stung, a reminder of his failure to shield her from his mother's hate. "Please talk to me," he pleaded, but his words were drowned by the jet's whine, its landing gear kissing the grass with surgical precision. The crowd buzzed, a hive of shock and curiosity, as the jet's door opened. Amara emerged, her silhouette sharp against the aircraft's gleam, a folder clutched like a weapon. Zara's breath caught, the pendant pulsing with her resolve. She took the microphone from the stunned bandleader, her voice steady, slicing through the chaos. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry for the interruption, but there's something you need to know." Helena's eyes widened, her face paling as she clutched Lucas's arm. "What is she doing?" she hissed, her voice a mix of fear and fury. "Lucas, stop her!" But he stood frozen, his gaze darting between Zara and the jet, his hands trembling. Zara's chest tightened, his silence again, a wound that bled trust. She faced the crowd, her voice rising, clear and unyielding. "Helena believes I married her son for money, that I'm a fraud who doesn't belong. But the truth is, I've built something she can't imagine." She paused, letting the words sink in, her eyes locking on Helena's. "I own a company that reclaims stolen African art, a legacy worth billions. That jet, it's mine, and it's brought someone who knows the real fraud here." Amara stepped forward, her presence commanding, her voice cutting through the murmurs. "Helena Whitaker," she said, holding up the folder. "In 1987, you sold a Yoruba mask, stolen from a Lagos collection, on the black market. You built your life on that theft, on my people's pain." She opened the folder, revealing photos, receipts, a damning trail. The crowd gasped, phones flashing, as Helena's face crumpled, her hands clawing at her throat. "That's a lie!" Helena shrieked, her voice raw, desperate. "You fabricated this! Lucas, she's lying!" But her words faltered under Amara's steady gaze, the evidence undeniable. Guests whispered, their shock turning to judgment, the weight of Helena's hypocrisy laid bare. Zara's heart raced, the pendant afire against her skin. She turned to Lucas, her voice soft but piercing. "I hid my wealth to know you loved me for me, not my money. But I needed you to fight for me, Lucas, against her." She gestured to Helena, whose eyes darted, wild with panic. "You didn't. Not until it was too late." Lucas's face twisted, guilt and horror warring in his eyes. "Zara, I didn't know," he whispered, stepping toward her. "I should have stopped her. I'm sorry." His voice broke, but Zara's resolve held firm. His apology was a bandage on a wound too deep, and she wasn't sure it was enough. She faced Helena, her voice a blade. "You saw my skin and assumed I was nothing. But I'm the heir to a legacy you stole from, a legacy I've spent my life reclaiming." Her eyes burned, tears held back by sheer will. "You called me a leech, but you're the one who profited from my people's pain." Helena staggered, her hands shaking as she clutched Lucas's arm. I didn't mean—" Her voice faltered, the crowd's gaze a noose tightening around her. She looked to Lucas, pleading, but his eyes were on Zara, filled with a dawning realization of what he'd failed to do. And Amara stepped closer, her voice calm but unrelenting. "The mask wasn't just art, it was sacred, a piece of my culture, sold to line your pockets. She held up a photo, the mask's intricate lines a mirror to Zara's pendant. You thought you could erase us, but we're here, and we remember. The crowd was a sea of whispers, phones capturing every word, every tear in Helena's eyes. Zara's chest ached, not with triumph, but with the weight of what she'd done. She'd wanted to expose Helena, to reclaim her dignity, but Lucas's silence lingered, a shadow on her victory. She turned to him, her voice barely above a whisper. I needed you to choose me, Lucas, not her. He stepped forward, his hands reaching for hers, but she held up a hand, stopping him. I love you, she said, her voice cracking, but love isn't enough if you let her tear me apart. The pendant burned, a reminder of her strength, her solitude. She'd built an empire, faced a world that tried to break her, but Lucas's hesitation was a wound she couldn't ignore. The jet's engines idled, a low hum of power, as Amara stood beside her, a sister in this fight. Zara's eyes swept the crowd, landing on Helena, now small, broken, her mask of superiority shattered. You don't get to define me, Zara said, her voice ringing out. Not you, not anyone. The crowd erupted in murmurs, some in awe, others in judgment, as the jet's presence loomed, a testament to Zara's power. Lucas's eyes were wet, his voice hoarse. Zara, I choose you. I swear it. But his words felt late, a plea from a man who'd failed her when it mattered most. She wanted to believe him, but the pendant, her ancestor's voice, whispered caution. As she turned toward the jet, the garden's light fading, Zara felt the weight of her truth. She'd unveiled Helena's sins, reclaimed her place, but the cost was a fracture in her heart. The jet waited, a symbol of her strength, but also her solitude. What came next, Lucas's choice, Helena's reckoning, would decide if love could survive the truth. Zara stood at the jet's open door, the California breeze tugging at her gown, the pendant a searing weight against her chest. The garden behind her buzzed with whispers, the crowd's eyes boring into her back, their phones still flashing, immortalizing the wreckage of Helena's downfall. Amara's evidence had stripped the older woman bare, her stolen past exposed like raw flesh. But Zara's victory tasted bitter, tinged with the ache of Lucas's silence, his late plea echoing in her ears. I choose you. Her fingers trembled, clutching the railing as she faced the man she'd vowed to love, his green eyes pleading, fractured with guilt. Zara, please, Lucas said, stepping closer, his voice raw, barely audible over the jet's idling hum. I was wrong. I should have fought for you from the start. His hands reached for her, hesitant, as if afraid she'd vanish. Her heart twisted, wanting to fall into him, to believe his words could mend the cracks his hesitation had carved. But the pendant burned, a reminder of her ancestors' betrayed trust, of a world that punished her for daring to rise. She turned to him, her eyes fierce, holding back the tears that threatened to betray her. You chose me too late, Lucas, she said, her voice low, cutting. I needed you when she called me a fraud, when she tried to erase me. Where were you then? Her words trembled, not with weakness, but with the weight of a truth she'd carried alone. Lucas's face crumpled, his hands falling to his sides. I was scared, he admitted, his voice breaking. Scared of losing her, of breaking my family. But I see it now, Zara. I see you. His eyes searched hers, desperate, but she saw the flicker of doubt, the shadow of a man torn between love and loyalty. Helena's voice broke through, small and trembling, a stark contrast to her earlier venom. Zara, she said, stepping forward, her face streaked with tears, her composure shattered. I was wrong. I let my fears, my past, blind me. I'm sorry. The words were fragile, a plea from a woman humbled by her own sins. The crowd hushed, phones still raised, capturing her fall. Zara's jaw tightened, her fingers brushing the pendant, its edges sharp with her ancestors' pain. You saw my skin and decided I was less, she said, her voice steady, ringing across the garden. You didn't just hurt me, Helena. You tried to steal my place, my worth. She paused, her eyes locking onto Helena's, seeing not just guilt, but fear. A woman facing the loss of her son, her world. Sorry isn't enough. You earn forgiveness, and I'm not sure you can. Helena flinched, her hands trembling, but she nodded, her voice barely a whisper. I'll try. I want to know you, Zara. The real you. The sincerity in her eyes was raw, unfamiliar, but Zara's heart remained guarded. Trust was a currency she'd spent sparingly, and Helena had no credit left. Lucas stepped between them, his voice urgent. Zara, I'll make this right. I'll stand by you, always, no more silence. His hands reached for hers, and this time, she didn't pull away. His touch was warm, familiar, but it carried the weight of his failure. She wanted to believe him, to rebuild what Helena had tried to break. But the pendant whispered caution, a reminder of the cost of love. She looked at him, her voice soft but firm. Then prove it, Lucas. Not with words, but with actions. I won't live in a marriage where I fight alone. Her eyes burned, holding his, demanding more than promises. He nodded, his jaw set, a fire in his gaze she hadn't seen before. But doubt lingered, a shadow she couldn't shake. Amara stood nearby, her presence a quiet strength, the folder still in her hands. You did what you had to, she murmured to Zara, her voice low, steady. Your ancestors would be proud. Zara nodded, her throat tight. She'd reclaimed her truth, exposed Helena's lies, but the victory felt hollow, tainted by the fracture in her heart. She turned to the crowd, her voice rising, clear and unyielding. This day was meant to celebrate love, but it became a fight for my place. Let this be a lesson. Your worth isn't defined by those who refuse to see you. The guests murmured, some nodding, others still filming, the jet a towering symbol of her power. She handed the microphone back, her hands steady despite the storm inside. Zara, Lucas said, his voice hoarse as she stepped toward the jet stairs. Where are you going? His eyes were wet, fear and love warring within them. She paused, her gown catching the breeze, the pendant gleaming under the fading light. Florence, she said, her voice calm but resolute. Our honeymoon. Come with me, Lucas, if you're ready to be my partner, not just my husband. Her words were a challenge, a line drawn in the sand. She climbed the stairs, Amara at her side, the crowd's murmurs fading behind her. Lucas hesitated, his eyes darting to Helena, then back to Zara. I'm coming, he said, his voice firm, and he followed, his steps quickening as he boarded the jet. Helena called out, her voice breaking. Lucas, wait! But he didn't turn back, his choice made in that moment. As the jet's door closed, Zara sank into the leather seat, the pendant warm against her skin. The engines roared, lifting them above the garden, the wreckage of the day left below. Lucas sat beside her, his hand finding hers, but she didn't look at him, her gaze fixed on the horizon. She'd won, exposed Helena, reclaimed her place, but the cost was a question that lingered. Could love survive a truth this sharp? She closed her eyes, the pendant a pulse of strength. She'd built an empire from ashes, faced a world that tried to diminish her. But Lucas's choice, Helena's apology, opened a door to something new. Not a fairy tale, but a chance to rebuild, to demand respect. As the jet soared toward Florence, Zara wondered if she could forgive, if Lucas could earn her trust. The pendant whispered, "You are enough." And for the first time, she believed it. As the jet pierced the clouds, Zara's pendant gleamed, a silent vow to her ancestors. She'd unveiled Helena's sins, reclaimed her worth, but the victory was bittersweet. Lucas's hand rested in hers, his choice made, yet doubt lingered, a scar from his silence. Below, the garden faded, its chaos captured in viral snippets, a testament to her strength. Love, she realized, was a battlefield, not a fairy tale. Forgiveness might come, but it would be earned. With Florence on the horizon, Zara exhaled, ready to forge a future where her voice, her legacy, would never be silenced again.